Begin with our monthly webinar hit record, and we are live in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from CCMA. Each of us wants to attract and accompany as diverse a student population as possible, and yet many of our campus ministries find that very, very difficult. Today's webinar will definitely help you with that. We have some incredible guests, but before we turn over this month's webinar to them, a couple of announcements. Number one, next month's webinar on January 15th will be led by Kelly Adamson from the University of Dayton. Topic is evangelization, richly Catholic and deeply hospitable to other faiths. How do you share the richness of the Catholic faith and also be hospitable to those from outside of the church? Well, Kelly is going to lead us through the way they approach that at the University of Dayton, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. You can actually reserve your spot today. It's no cost to CCMA members and only $10 for non-CCMA members at ccmanetwork.org/webinars. Number two, okay, we would love to see you at the CCMA convention in May in San Diego. Come on, folks, San Diego in May. What could be better than that, you know? So if you have not yet claimed early bird pricing, I talked to a few people, we pulled some strings, and you have until 11:59 tonight for early bird pricing. So literally the switch will be flipped and the price will go up $100 as of midnight tonight. CCMA's convention is called Call 2020, and some of you have been to conventions in the past. They're incredibly meaningful, practical, uplifting events, and this one is no exception. I really can say with confidence this will be the event to help you network, learn, and be renewed in your ministry. We have incredible guests like Dr. Jean Tweng, who wrote iGen, Father Josh Johnson, Mary Bielski, Father Mike Martin, and over 35 dynamic workshop presenters. Called is going to be something really spectacular. Please make sure you lock in your early bird prices. Just head on over to ccmanetwork.org, click on Call 2020 at the very top. And third, just a personal note, let's really be praying for one another during Advent. Our work is really hard, and yes, the laborers are few, and yet I think each one of us knows that the Lord is using us to do something very impactful on campus. And I don't know about you, but that's what reminds me that it's worthwhile. So thank you so much for all that you're doing, and please join the CCMA staff. We pray for campuses every Thursday, and we invite you to just be praying for other campus ministers around the country. This is a bit of a busy stretch from Thanksgiving through Advent and then into Christmas, so we really do need to be praying for one another. Okay, those are our announcements. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guests. First, Mimi Tran. Mimi is a campus minister at Rice University in Houston. She's earned both her BA and MA in theology from the University of St. Thomas. She's Vietnamese American and a native of Houston. She and her husband have a 2-year-old son, and they live in Katy, Texas. So Mimi, welcome. Great to have you. Our next guest is Gabriela Karaszewski. Gabriela is the director of the Office of Young Adult and Campus Ministry for the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. She obtained an MA in Pastoral Studies from the University of St. Thomas and a Master's of Science from the University of Washington. She serves as a member of the National Advisory Team for Young Adult Ministry for the Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Gabriela was previously the director of faith formation for 10 years at a parish in Texas. She's originally from Mexico. And then we have Dorris Martin, Barrow, the third. He's a campus minister at the Newman Center at Texas Southern University, also in the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Dorris is the coordinator of religious ed, also at St. Monica Parish in Houston, and he's originally from Louisiana. Dorris, how do you say your hometown in Louisiana?
It is pronounced Opelousas.
Opelousas, I love that. Okay, great. Well, welcome. And last but not least, if he's able to join us today, we have Father Ray Cook. Father Ray is a missionary oblate of Mary Immaculate, on loan to the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. He currently serves as the chaplain to the students, faculty, and staff community at St. Mary's Chapel. He's the director of the Catholic Student Center and campus ministry at Rice University. So we're delighted to have Father Ray, Dorris, Gabriela, and Mimi as our guests. And Gabriela, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. So we have put this small little presentation in a hope that we can help you come up with ideas and reasons why to expand your campus ministry and serve many different cultures and many different ethnic backgrounds of all the students in your campuses. So I would like to start with reading Evangelii Gaudium, paragraph 117. When properly understood, cultural diversity is not a threat to church unity. It is the Spirit who brings forth a rich variety of gifts, while at the same time creating a unity, which is never uniformity, but a multifaceted and inviting harmony. The reason why I like this slide is because it talks about how unity and inclusion does not mean uniformity. In the 1960s, in the Catholic Church in the United States, we made a big mistake to think that whenever someone from a different culture or ethnic background came into our parish or our campus ministry, they had to act like us, and that's called assimilation. You come into our door as long as you leave your culture and your traditions out. That was a big mistake. It was called assimilation, uniformity. Now what we have learned is that we need to integrate, which is what a little bit of the word harmony reminds us. Integration. Everyone plays different instruments in the orchestra. Everyone brings different gifts to the table. So integration is different than assimilation. Integration is welcoming the gifts and talents of every culture that's represented in your ministry. Therefore, evangelization should never be Americanization. So that's something that we would like to keep in mind as we go through in this webinar. Just to shine some lights of why we're talking about this. This is a graph that doesn't necessarily represent the universities of the United States, but it represents all the Catholics in the United States. As you can see, there is a huge increase of Catholics from the non-European origin population. So we're talking about 54 being white, and this is already 10 years old. We're waiting for the next census. It's going to happen next year. So this data is 10 years old. 54% white, 38% Hispanic, 4% Asian or Pacific Islander, 3% Black, African American, African or Afro-Caribbean, and 1% American Indian or Alaska Native. All these numbers are growing very fast. So especially of Hispanics. But before that, I would like to mention that as of today, 33% of the parishes in the United States already have masses other than English. So already a third of the parishes in the United States are offering a mass or ministry in a different language than English. Because why? Most people who come from different backgrounds, even if they were born in the United States, but their parents come from a specific country, they feel comfortable praying. Their faith is in the language of their parents, not so much on English, but on the language of their parents. So my question to you is this happening in campus ministry already? Is it a third of our campus ministry done in a language different than English? So, and also along those lines is, as a congregation, as our participant students are changing, is the leadership in our campus ministry changing? Because indeed in parishes, this hasn't changed dramatically. The leadership is still being predominantly white Anglo-Saxon leadership. So just to throw in a slide, because there is a special group that we need to pay attention, not forgetting about the other groups, is the Hispanic population. If you haven't been in the website of the fifth encuentro, Roman 5, like the letter V, please go and look for that, because there has been a huge process in the last 5 years in the Catholic Church in the United States to understand where the Hispanic population stands right now in the United States and how can we serve them better. But just to shine a light, 55% of all US Catholics under the age of 30 are Hispanic. You may tell me, well, Gabriela, I don't see them in my campus ministry. And indeed, because only or colleges. So therefore, you don't see them as often. Yet, we need to learn what has happened in the Catholic Church at the parish level in the last 50, 60 years to see how we can serve them better. Because I can bet you in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we will be seeing the 55% present in your campuses. We don't see them yet, but they will be there. Most of them are not migrants. Most of them were born in the United States. So they are bilingual and they're bicultural. But let's learn from the failures and successes that have been happening in ministry at the parish level with Hispanics, so we don't repeat those mistakes at the campus ministry in the universities. Has your university or college experienced a significant demographic shift in the past few years? Have you seen a change? And if yes, how has your campus ministry responded to this population shift in your campus? Has there been any adaptations, any changes to welcome this type of population? And finally, before I pass on the microphone to Dorris, who's going to enlighten us in a beautiful reflection, I want to go into the 6 stages, because all of us are at one of these stages. Some of us may be in stage 1, most of us may be in a stage 4, and few campus ministries will be in a stage 6. But these are called the 6 stages of intercultural sensitivity, taken from the best practices for shared parishes at the USCCB. But this applies also to campus ministry. How are we integrating different cultures in our ministry? Number 1, are we denying the fact that there are few students from different ethnic backgrounds at our university? Are we just simply not even seeing them? There may be 1 or 2 sitting on the back pew on Sunday Mass, maybe 1 or 2 in our Bible groups, but are we denying that we don't see them too? Defense, we see them, but we think there is no room, there is no money, there are no ministers that speak their language or understand their culture, so we might as well just fake like we don't see them. Number 3, minimizing. We're aware of their presence and we respond to their needs, but minimizing, saying it has to be done our way, not your way. And as long as the Catholic Center doesn't change, you are more than welcome to be here and maybe start some sort of ministry with the students that are from your ethnic background. So that's minimizing. But the threshold happens between 3 and 4. It is the acceptance, the willingness to shift perspective with conditions. We will offer Mass in your language of your origin or where you feel like you identify better your faith and your beliefs. We will change it. However, it's going to have to be at a different time. And it's going to have to be very polite. You are there, we are here. We accept you, but still you cannot take the main time of Mass. It should be an early morning or late evening. Adaptation. The campus minister and the peer ministers create relationships across cultures. Both groups are open to new ideas. The leadership team has developed intercultural competencies. They have been trained to serve all different types of cultures. And finally, integration is our dream. We want to integrate everyone, so all the different ethnic backgrounds in our campuses are represented in our center, and then they're represented at the leadership making decision body in our Newman Center or Catholic Center. And there is a shared ownership that everything that happens there is not just us versus them, but it's a we. So in a crash course in 2 minutes, these are the 6 stages. In which stage do you think you and your team are at right now? And what is not allowing you to go to the next step? What obstacles can you remove? What items can you learn so you can go to the next stage and reach finally the integration stage? So now I share the microphone with Dorris, who's going to share with us how we shouldn't be walking away, how we should not be denying the reality that we see, but how we should go back to Jerusalem like in the Emmaus. So Dorris?
Thank you, Gabriela. So the title of what I want to share with everyone is, I'm headed back to Jerusalem. Just to let everyone know, the fruit of this reflection is rooted in what is the catechetical theme for the church here in the United States, and it's Stay With Us. So in gathering on conference call with fellow campus ministers, but specifically with those who are campus ministers at historically Black colleges and universities, and those who at other universities minister to people of color, the reflection of the appearance on the road to Emmaus came to mind. And within that passage, in my reflection, there were four things that stood out. And if you recall the passage, and I'll share it with you, Luke 24, verses 13 through 35. The first component was making connections. So the story and the passage reads, now that very day, two of them were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. It happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. One of the immediate things that comes to mind here is making a connection. Jesus saw it necessary to connect with two disciples who were heading away from Jerusalem. And I think it's important for us as campus ministers, whenever we're on the journey, when we're walking on campus, when we're engaging with students, is to make an initial connection and get to know the students that you're working with or the students that you encounter just based on what they're actually talking about. I find myself asking students that question. If I'm in my office and they're conversing, I'll walk out and ask them, what are you talking about? Because it's, I think, an invitation or at least the genesis of beginning a meaningful relationship. The second part of the passage is fellowship. So as they were approaching the village in which they were going, he gave them the impression that he was going further, but they urged him to stay with them, for it was nearly evening and the day was almost over. So he went in to stay with them, and it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us, and on the way opened the scriptures to us? Sometimes it's from that encounter, that follow-up invitation, which I think is tethered to connection with those that you're speaking with, is an invitation to fellowship. I truly believe in my tenure as a campus minister that fellowship is one of the foundational components in connecting with persons on campus, especially persons who may not look like me, may come from a totally different cultural background, or it may not even be from the United States. Fellowship has a way of uniting people. And I know for college students, fellowship with a meal definitely has a way of doing that. The third part is being intentional. So the passage continues, so they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, the Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon. This is the beginning of what the turning back is really about. So these two disciples who are actually leaving the place where the master was, encountering the master on the road to Emmaus, encountering him, recognizing him in the fellowship and the breaking of the bread, are now returning to that which they were, in my own reflection, running away from, which is often, I think, a challenge as a campus minister. Those things which are easy, that makes, I say, the ministry a little bit more pleasant. But I've heard it said that, ministry is to encounter students in ways that are different than what we're used to. We encounter people from different cultures that we may be unfamiliar with. And if you may not know, what is politically correct and how to interact, that's okay. Trust the Holy Spirit will guide you if your heart is set on truly encountering the person who is the student. And here's the last component of the story. Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. One of the joys I've experienced as a campus minister is being able to share my story with students and asking them about theirs. What brought them to Texas Southern University? It's where my ministry is located. What's been, tell me about your life. Tell me about your family. Tell me about, why did you choose the degree path you to leave this university? Because for many of us, the students that we have, those we've been entrusted with, we have them for a short period of time. In some cases, for students, if they're really, they're really good, they're going to be here for 3 years. And then if they're graduate students, less than that. And so with the time that we have, I think we should use it to, 1, make a connection, 2, spend time in fellowship with them, 3rd, be intentional in the activities we have with them, and 4th, share your story and learn more about them through their story.
Thank you, Doris. So even though Father Ray was not able to be here with us, I would like to share a little bit of what he was going to share. So now we're going to go into the best practices of how we've been able to integrate in our campus different ethnicities. At Rice University, Father Ray observed that there was a really good group of Hispanic students. So he's been there already about 5 years. And about 2 to 3 years ago, he made the step to start offering Mass in Spanish. So that was the first step, Mass in the language once a week. Then he was able to gather a good group of Hispanic leaders, student leaders, and say, why don't we start forming you while you're here for the next 2 years? Because as you know, we only have students for 4 years. So he sent a couple of them to a leadership formation given by Instituto Fe y Vida in Chicago. If you wanna, we have it in the resources at the end of the presentation. But he sent them to get trained on how to do ministry, because not necessarily a student knows how to do ministry, right? Specifically in the context of Hispanic ministry. So he sent them to be trained. And then he found out someone to sponsor them, so they become paid part-time Hispanic peer ministers. And these wonderful students have started small groups that serve especially Hispanic students. So there has been a series of steps integrating them. But one thing that Father Ray wanted to share with all of you is that even though he speaks Spanish, even though he was few years in San Antonio, he comes from the Northeast, but he was 5 years in the seminary in San Antonio, and he feels like he understands the Hispanic culture. He wants to move himself from the picture and let the students who understand better themselves run the ministry. So the message he wanted to give you all, that even though we may be competent on the language, even though we may think we understand the culture, it is best to leave the students from a specific background lead the ministry themselves, so it gives more fruits. So now I turn the microphone to his campus minister, Mimi. And Mimi, would you mind sharing us what other things have you done at Rice University in regards to this topic?
My pleasure. Thanks, Gabriela. So we've done some pretty fun things in the last 2 years that I've been at Rice. Some interesting things about Rice: it's quite a diverse university. It's about 35% Caucasian. And these are statistics actually from enrollment as of August 2019. 35% Caucasian, 33% Asian American, 18% Hispanic, 8% African American, 5% multiracial. So we have quite a lot of different groups, backgrounds, cultures, religions here at Rice University. Some of our favorite practices or best practices that we've done to incorporate culture into our programming. Something that we did during Lent of 2019 was that a simple way, and it was pretty turnkey, was that we utilized CRS's Rice Bowl program. They did a weekly simple meal So we have a kitchen in our student center, and one of my favorite hobbies is cooking. So we cooked a meatless meal every Friday, highlighting a different country or culture, and cooking a cuisine, a meatless vegetarian meal, a simple meal of that culture. So, for example, we did a Guatemalan black bean soup. We did sopa de frijol. I made Vietnamese congee, and each week we would print out like a map of the country, some interesting facts about the country, recipes for the meals that we made, and it ended up being a really wonderful way to just dialogue with one another about food that relaxes people, and it starts conversation, it begins dialogue. So we actually had students who were Chinese who don't normally come to the center, but they heard that we were going to be serving congee that day, came by because their friends invited them, and they were like, wow, this is great. You know, it kind of reminds me of this time back at home, or this time I visited this country, or so it was just a wonderful conversation, dialogue starter to have. It also just brings solidarity with one another. I think that's something that CRS does so beautifully, is they are really great about emphasizing solidarity with one another. And so the programming that they do is usually geared towards embracing diversity, embracing cultures of all different backgrounds. Another thing that we did through CRS specifically was just did a solidarity vigil where we posted up imagery of different topics and points of reflection for embracing solidarity with our brothers and sisters from around the world. And it would be things such as human dignity and work and food, things that we all need as human beings. And it would highlight people from all around the world and their stories. It would share their stories and how they live. And students were really into it. They would walk around praying with the imagery, reflecting with the imagery, writing their own notes and reflections on how they connected to those stories. And it was so wonderful that even though it was supposed to be a one-day thing, there were several students who asked us if we could leave it up during the week so that they could do it again, or that they could invite their friends to come around and do the solidarity walk with them. And that was so touching to me and to everybody else who was involved in it. There's so many ways you can incorporate cultures and build bridges with the other backgrounds and cultures on campus. There's a Muslim student association, and there's been a private kind of group to do a Christian Muslim study group, a reading group. So we have some of our Catholic students and some of the Muslim students who get together bi-weekly, and they read the Quran and the Bible side by side and take notes and compare, and they dialogue about it, and they come to understand each other's religions and understandings, their different theologies, and it's really amazing to see that. We also recognize that, you know, sometimes our universities, they may not be as diverse as other universities, or even our own university cultures. We can kind of sometimes live within our own bubble. Something we did recently was we had an inter-university women's group, a day of reflection, where we, the three different campus ministers from local universities, Rice University, the University of Houston, and the University of St. Thomas, and women from other universities too in the surrounding area. We just got together. Didn't matter what culture background you're from, didn't matter what school you're from. We came together, but we were exposed to the different cultures. We were exposed to other university cultures, and that was a wonderful way to celebrate each other and recognize each other, acknowledge each other, and affirm each other, despite being just in the same sense that we were all Catholic and wanting to worship together. And that was a really wonderful, beautiful experience, especially for our students who said, well, this, you know, I never would have met that person before. And when we had our small groups, I learned about their stories, and I got to hear about their lives and how much we had in common. And that was a wonderful, beautiful way to just come together in solidarity. So those are some of our favorite practices, or some of our best practices that we've experienced so far that have been very enriching to our students, not just to our students, but even to myself as a campus minister, to see the beauty of the universality of the church. And it makes me really, truly appreciate our faith all the more because of it.
Thank you very much, Mimi, for sharing examples that you just recently lived in your campus. So now I would like to, Doris, do you have one more thing you'd like to share with us about best practices, or go deeper into the sharing your story?
Yes, absolutely. So in the My Story, Your Story, it's not something that I came up with on my own. I'm actually borrowing this idea from Dr. Timon Davis. She shared it on a webinar, I think it was through CCMA, of how important that is. But in addition to that, about being intentional, I kind of think about, you know, one of the ways I've been intentional on my campus, but let me at least share this with you demographically. So Texas Southern University is 78% African American of African descent, 7% Hispanic, 3% Asian, 3% Anglo, and the rest it's listed as international students. However, this is from 2008. What I know for sure going into 2020, that the percentage of those students who are Hispanic will definitely be in the double digits. So they already know that that is the case. So I've been intentional about approaching sororities and fraternities and academic organizations on campus, but also those that are cultural as well. So as an example, there is the Hispanic Student Association, and it is an association just diverse within in and of itself. So it's comprised of international students born here in the United States, whether they're Mexican American, or maybe their ancestry is, maybe they're from El Salvador or country of Panama. They're from all over. And so being intentional about engaging with different groups, even there's who are from countries in Africa, predominantly Nigerian, but you also have a large Cameroonian student population here as well. Being African American doesn't necessarily make me the expert in Nigerian culture or Cameroonian culture, but it gives me an opportunity, you know, to engage with students. But the other thing that has been one thing that I've encouraged is for them to be who they are, to genuinely be who they are. When they're around me, if they feel comfortable speaking Spanish, and sometimes I could tell that maybe there's a bit trepidation about it, and you know, I encourage it because part of me wants to learn Spanish. I've been telling myself that for years, and so God bless my students, they've been helping me to do that. So I say be intentional, finding those cultural organizations and extending an invitation. So one of the things that's going to happen here at Texas Southern University on Saturday, there was a mural that was commissioned on the side of the building. It's a social justice mural, and it's based on the pastoral letter on combating racism, Open Wide Our Hearts, the enduring call to love. But in it, we also have the words, an end of human sex trafficking, an end to racism, justice for all. And so the invitation is that the mural is for the entire university. The mural is for the community in which the university resides. And so there is a study session that we're going to be doing that's based on the pastoral letter available on the USCCB website. That's for college campuses. And so one of the things that we're going to do as a diverse gathering of students is to spend time with that pastoral letter in ways that we can help to combat racism and things that we can do to foster, which is truly the universality of the church, the beauty that's within the church in everything that is unique about our different cultures. So something that's coming up on Saturday.
Thank you, Doris. So we're gonna go on into our final remarks, something that we all wanna walk away with. And my final remark is one more slide. So I believe all of us as ministers of the church and universities and campus ministry, we need to become intercultural competent. There is a reality that we can no longer change. The demographics are changing and they will change even more in the future. So we need to become intercultural competent. And what this means is to learn more, which is the knowledge of other cultures. We can read, we can study, and even better, we can go and have a coffee with the students from different cultures or any background to learn more about what they like, how they pray, what the traditions were when they were growing up. So that's knowledge. 2 is the skills. The skills you learn as you go. And 3 is the attitude. And I always compare these as the faith, hope, and love. Which one is the most important of the 3 is love. So out of the knowledge, skills, and attitude, the most important one is the attitude. It is the openness to have curiosity, to be willing to do things differently than the way that has been done. And it is, you can learn all you want about our culture, even the language if you want. And you can get all the skills you can from a summer intensive training. But if you don't have the attitude, none of it will be translated into love. So attitude is the most important thing. Any closing remarks, Mimi, that you may have?
I really resonate with what Father Ray wanted to share, was that as ministers, we kind of just, one of the best things we can do is kind of just step out of the way and allow the students and the people that we serve to show us how they celebrate faith. And we continue to just dialogue with them, support them, affirm them, and just allow them to show us how to do it better.
Doris?
I would say ditto. I agree as well. So because encouraging them to, accompaniment comes to mind. Accompaniment permits them to live out whatever their God-given talents are, and it's room for them to be able to express that. When we get out of the way and allow them to, to do things, allow them to minister, because it's a two-way thing. I mean, they minister to us and we minister back to them. So in closing, there's this quote from St. Catherine Drexel that comes to mind, and she says, if we wish to serve God and love our neighbor well, I would say the students, we must manifest our joy in the service we render to him and to them. Let us open wide our hearts, because it is the joy which invites us. Press forward and fear nothing. Let them lead. I'll close with that.
Thank you, Doris. And so we have some slides that we put together for you on some books or training that you may take advantage of. And for sure, there's many more, but here are just few of them. There's these 2 booklets sold by the USCCB, very cheap, in English and Spanish: Building Intercultural Competence for Ministers, Best Practices for Shared Parishes, so they may be one. Please read the conclusions of the 5th Encuentro for your own region. There is a beautiful national study by Dr. Holzman of Spino from Boston College on Catholic parishes. On racism, these are some links that Dorris provided for us. If you haven't read the pastoral letter on racism, Open Wider Hearts, it is a beautiful letter combating racism. There is other statements and letters that also shine a light on what we were talking about today. And finally, some networks and trainings on Hispanic ministry. The St. Mary's University here in San Antonio, Texas, gives a training every month on Hispanic ministry for specifically for training ministers in colleges, but also in general, there's other wonderful institutes like CEPI, Southeast Pastoral Institute in Miami, Florida, Institute of Fe y Vida. We have La Red, which is a national network. And that's it as far as Hispanic resources. So now we jump into questions, Mike. Do we have any questions or remarks?
Okay, yes, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I find it challenging and encouraging at the same time. And I always learn from our friends in Texas. Troy has a question. He said, when trying to take steps to create a more integrated ministry, what does the balance look like in empowering our minority students to lead the way on helping our ministry achieve integration versus the campus ministers taking that lead themselves? I don't want to saddle the growth simply on those who may not feel totally included, but also campus ministry staff may not know the cultural needs as well as the students themselves. That's a really interesting question. So, what's that balance between an adult taking the lead versus really handing off this process to students? What do you think about that?
I think the awareness needs to happen in each moment for the students. So it has to be an eye-opener of, yes, there are all cultures, there is only other ethnic backgrounds. Again, not the denial, but we need to move them into level 3 or 4 of those 6 steps that I showed. And so there has to be some training by the campus minister on the other student leaders and on how to integrate and welcome or make feel comfortable other students. And yet, once we identify if there is a good number of students who may no longer be a minority, but a majority in our campuses, how can we train them to start their ministry? And we're not trying to do parallel, like many pastors have the fear to have parallel parishes, 2 parishes in one. That's not what we're trying to create in campus ministry. We want to do it well. We don't want to make the mistakes that's happening in parishes. We want to have always integration, and that comes from the top. If the top has the vision to keep everyone together, even if there is a Spanish or an Italian or a Vietnamese group meeting within our campus ministry, if we provide the moments in which we're all together, I guess that's very important. But I don't know if Mimi or Dorris have any other answers to that question.
I think more of a concrete example of what has happened at Rice, Father Ray opened an invitation to our Hispanic students and asked them, would you like to do an Our Lady of Guadalupe feast day celebration? And they were very responsive and receptive to that. They loved the idea. He said, okay, if you want to do it, I need you to tell me what you need, and I need you to kind of lead it out, but let's stay in communication to see how we can make this happen. So the students, essentially, they knew they wanted to offer roses to Our Lady of Guadalupe. They knew the music that they wanted to do. They were in charge of finding the musicians for the Mass. They were in charge of figuring out what food they wanted to serve for the reception afterwards. And Father Ray just kind of stayed in the loop to make sure that they were being responsible and that communication was going on and that things were being checked off. So I think as ministers, we kind of, yes, we do have a role in overseeing and making sure that the students are being responsible and carrying out what they need to do, but we allow them to make these decisions and we accompany them and we continually communicate and work with them through assigning this. And they grow with practice to learn how to do it more independently. And we allow them to, and then you build the trust with them that way, I think. in my experience.
That's great. Doris, what do you think? Any insight there between kind of handing the reins over to students versus that guide on the side approach? Or
Yeah, so just kind of thinking about, so here at Texas Southern University, so I thought that perhaps presenting an idea for a project would be a good fit, and came up with some ideas, made some recommendations. But what I realized is that the students that I'm currently ministering to and ministering back to me, what they wanted was more sort of a intimate relationship, wanting to spend time more in fellowship, in more of kind of like a, I don't know, I extended an invitation for Lectio Divina, and what it eventually became was, okay, we're going to bring some food items, we're going to cook dishes that are authentic to, my family, and so we would alternate each week. Someone would pick dishes and everything to cook for that particular day. So we would gather around, we would eat, fellowship, and then we would break open the word. And I said, this is what the early church did. I said, this is also pointing to, the sacrifice of the Mass. So, but I allowed them to kind of create the format. I provided at least components of what I thought would be beneficial in it, and then they built an entire program around it, which includes bringing in food, breaking open the word, spending time discussion, and then the rest was just, fellowship, just fellowship together, for another 2-3 hours. So I think providing at least something, but then allowing them to build it was truly beneficial. It was a beautiful experience. So
that's great. Hey, I'll go to Lectio Divina anywhere that there's free food. Great, thanks for that. Let's ask our other folks on the line. If you have any questions, either feel free to open up your mic or...
Mike, I see a question here. I really liked it. It was like, so what should we do? Should we have separate cultural groups within our ministry? Or should we let them integrate with the groups that already exist? And I think, and even the person said, is it a both and answer? And I think yes. And I like to share that when I moved to the United States already 20, almost 30 years ago, I was 18 years old and I landed to the University of Washington. And everything was in English. I was the only Hispanic, only Spanish speaker at the time. I know now things have changed. And so that's where assimilation happened to me. Since they didn't have anything in Spanish, I had to learn English. I had to learn to pray in English. I had to do the worship in English. Everything became in English, and only English, but the American way of the church. So in those cases, when you're a true minority, I mean, you need, I mean, there is no other way around, right? But I think if you have more, like if I can think of, if there were 5 or 6 of us back then who spoke Spanish, I would have grown so much more in my faith if I was able to express my faith or do meditation with them in my language, in my native language back in the day. And so if there were more of us, then yes, let's start forming the small group in which we understand ourselves better without isolating ourselves from the rest of the ministry, because I also enrich tremendously by being part of the entire ministry that was taking place in English. So I think it is a both and answer to that question.
Great.
It's integrating them in what exists, but also allowing them, if there is enough in number, and empowering them to do something on their own.
That's great. Here's a question for each of you. What's required of a campus minister to really embrace this multi-ethnic approach? Is it just simply humility? Is it noticing details? Is it just being a little bit more observant of the students that they see around them? What are the qualities of the campus minister who does this really well?
traveling outside United States. When I grew up in Mexico and all I knew was the Hispanic culture, I truly didn't care about the rest of the world because all I knew was Spanish, Mexican culture, Mexican food. It was until I crossed the border or until I went to Europe that I opened my eyes and go, wow, the world is much more larger. The traditions are so different. And why do they like this and we don't like that? And start questioning myself. I think it requires an opening eyes and going farther from our boundaries to understand why we should be serving others in a different way. That's my personal experience. I think it is harder if you haven't had coffee with someone from another culture, haven't eaten their food, been in their house to see how their family functions. But I'll let Mimi and Dorris also to answer.
You know, one of the joys of being in Galveston-Houston, it's one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And so by virtue of that, I think it affects our campuses. And to be in, the environment, and it creates an atmosphere that you're going to be surrounded by many different cultures. And I think allowing yourself to be exposed to that culture. So if you haven't had the opportunity to travel internationally, I would say at least as a starting point, what are those organizations that are on your campus? And, it may not be something too formal. Maybe you just show up. You see a posting for a group and you just show up. And some campuses will even host festivals that are cultural. Just, grab a group of students and just go. And just sometimes, the casual interaction, it's amazing who God will put in your path, and it's not going to be a coincidence, because it happened to me on campus. Just randomly took my bike, went on campus and ran into, a student who had no idea that there was a Newman Center on campus, and who's about to graduate. So, but now he's trying to spend as much time as he can at the center and do, so I would say be willing to let's just go out and experience what there is on your campus. Yep.
Great.
And I agree with Doris and Gabriela. I think there is a lot of just go outside of the comfort zone just a little bit more. Just take a few more baby steps outside of what where you normally are, and be open to, again, build bridges with people that you haven't built a bridge with before, and start talking to people who you don't normally talk to. It's nice to encounter people, and it's nice to encounter other human beings who, despite the fact that you're on the same campus, you do live in, you could be very different worlds. They look quite differently. So just engaging with people that we don't normally engage with, and just having those authentic relationships, or trying to build authentic relationships with one another. I think that's pretty paramount in what a campus minister is. We're shepherds. We normally shepherd to our 99, and then we forget about the one in the flock, and we have to remember to go back out, go find that one that might feel like the black sheep, or that might feel a little bit outcasted, that might feel a bit forgotten. And just a lot of self-reflection, and then just be willing to step outside our comfort zones just a little more.
And one more advice: use the gospel to remind our students in our campus ministry why we're one body of Christ and why we should celebrate and embrace diversity. There's plenty of not only gospel, but parts of the Bible that talk about the unit, that we are all one. Because we all still at this time of age, 2019, run into students that still don't understand why we're one body of Christ. So why we're all one, I think use the Gospels more in our prayer services might be another tool as well. evangelize about we should be caring for others who don't look like us.
Well, Doris, Gabriela, Mimi, I just want to thank you so much for taking us a little bit out of our comfort zone. But as you said, Mimi, maybe it's just a few steps out, and maybe tomorrow it'll be a few more steps, and the day after a few more steps. So thank you very, very much. We're so grateful. And for anybody who's on the line, or even people who watch the replay of this, if you ever have a chance, head down to Galveston-Houston and visit with them. They have great food, but they've even better hospitality, and I always enjoy visiting you guys down there, even if the Texans do beat the Patriots occasionally. So with that said, we're so grateful for each and every one of you who's on the call today, and again, for those who watch the replay, thank you very, very much. Let's continue to pray for one another throughout the remainder of this season of Advent, and we will see you in January for our next webinar. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mike.